to welcome you to Games Programming. This is a third year core module for applied computing and computing science students, and what we're going to do is just explain how this module is going to work and why it's going to work that way. First of all, I feel I should introduce myself. I met many of you in the lab today. If I didn't meet you, hello. My name is Karen. I will be the lecturer for this module. I am also the Associate Dean for Learning and Teaching within the School of Science and Engineering. That means I have a managerial office, for want of a better term, over in the Fulton building. So I'm not based in the QMB, I'm over in the Fulton building in H10, which is on the second floor. My office number is 0132388 I tell you that because you have a telephone in the labs. And if you actually want to talk to me and can't be bothered walking over to Fulton, or it's wet, or it's cold, or anything else, then you can give me a ring. I suggest, in fact, that you probably never walk to Fulton without telling me you're coming, because being Associate Dean for Learning and Teaching, I spend a lot of time in different parts of the university, and I don't spend that much time actually in my office, so it's always worth emailing me and I'll give you an appointment. We have one lab tutor for this module, who is called Mitchell McJanet, and he will be starting next week with you. Sorry, I just burped. So, who am I? First and foremost, I am really a programmer. I'm an expert in AI and games. That's where my background comes from. That's what my PhD is in. And I'm really interested in game design and making games that are actually fun for people to play. Okay, so this is a game which I produced, which was on the iTunes store. Unfortunately, it's not anymore because I've never actually updated it to Swift. It was not in Objective-C back when that was how you programmed iPhone games. It's a simple idea for a game. So the idea is, as instructions say, you put all the pieces on a board such that the pieces must not attack each other. So where you see there are little balls coming out of the side of the wooden pieces, that's the angle that lasers can shoot from. Walls block attack, but holes do not. Okay. So in the middle of this, you've got the start of a level. This is an empty level, this is level not completed. And then at the end, you've got a complete level. So you can see the pink is completely blocked, can't get out at all. The yellows are only attacking each other, and that's absolutely fine. And the orange is just, and the yellow lines cross, but they don't actually attack the pieces, so that's okay. So this is a game I designed for an AI project a number of years ago and coded. What is really interesting about this game is every single level is designed automatically by an artificial intelligence. And also, the artificial intelligence decides how difficult the level is automatically. So you can see this level is called Easy 6. So this is a level that the computer thought was quite easy to play, but it thought it should be about the 6th level along in the game. It's a game called Combination, and it just gives you an idea of the sort of background I have and the sort of things I know how to do. So I know how to program touchscreen games, I know how to program things that actually work into the iTunes store and are sold commercially, and I know a lot about the AI of games. So the module outline, there's a lab from Monday from 1 PM to 6 PM, which is in the QMB labs downstairs. And then there's a seminar on Fridays from 9 AM to noon. And that's in Dalhousie 2S15, which is the ILS, which is the Interactive Learning Suite. A lot of what we're going to do in this module is not traditional lectures and traditional ways of working. It's going to be a bit more interactive than that. The real goal of this module is to get to the point where you could create your own computer game of a standard that you can launch to market. Okay, you don't have to launch it to market. If you want to make a lot of money trying to sell your game, you're absolutely welcome to. You own the IP for your game. But we're looking to get to that standard, that sort of finished product that you could actually sell and market if you wanted to. So the main learning you'll have in this module is I'm going to teach you how to write larger, more complex programs than you have previously. So this could be the largest bit of code that you've ever written. I'm going to teach you software engineering principles as found in the games industry, as well as more general in the industry. I know some of you won't be that interested in games. Most of what we're learning here can be completely transferred to other projects. The way that I think of this module is really a precursor for the honours project. So what you're doing for the first time in this module is really creating a big bit of software for yourself with some help along the way. This module is really scaffolded. Every week there'll be a different topic, and I'll really help you get to that point when you can get the final game done, so that you know how to scaffold things yourself next year when you're doing your honours project. The British Computer Society are really keen on what they call LEPSI, which are legal, ethical, social and professional issues. And for a degree to be accredited, you've got to have those issues talked about within the module. There's quite a lot of those within this module. To begin with, there's copyright issues, so you mustn't breach copyright within this module. We'll talk a little bit about cooperative graphics and how that actually works. We'll talk about how to use the correct software and hardware in a given situation and how not to have too much bias towards the correct software and hardware is. We will consider the end user of computer games. So we'll think about disabilities, age, ethics of computer games, and whether those are really important. And then we'll also look at security issues. So that's both how to make sure that your game is not hacked, but it's also how to secure the personal information of the people playing. So things like GDPR really come into that. So you might have already noticed by the fact that you're watching this video that this is not your standard module, okay? In particular, there are very few, if any, lectures from me in this module. That's because we're using what's called the flipped classroom approach. So the idea of the flipped classroom approach is that out of class, before you come to class, you guys really study so that when it's during classes, you can actually get feedback on your concepts and where you've got to. So the traditional approach, where we do lectures, is we do a lecture and then we kind of leave you to get on with it. Okay, and the difficult bit often is that leaving you to get on with it and actually applying the lecture. So we're trying things around here in that you'll be given reading to do beforehand each week, and then we'll do the applying bit together in the seminar, and then afterwards you can go away and check that you've actually got that learning. So this is called the flipped classroom. It's a relatively new way of teaching and running modules, but I think last year's students really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you will as well. Why are we doing this? Well, there's quite a lot of evidence that people learn more deeply because they're actually learning how to do it. There's quite a lot of evidence that people, if you're active participants in your learning, you really learn very well. So for example, we'll have a quiz each week, and I'm asking you to write one question for the quiz each week. The reason for doing this is twofold. One, if you have to write a good question from some material you're learning, you read it in a different way. You read it a lot more thoroughly. You don't do what we call surface reading. So it means you're really thinking about the material and thinking, is that a good question? What sort of question could I ask? That's the first one. The second one is that when I put the quizzes together, I will check the questions. I'll probably add some questions to it. But it gives me an idea of the sort of things that you are focusing on when you're reading. And it gives me an idea as to how to question you during the seminars and make sure you're getting all you can from the course. So that's one example. There's a lot of evidence as well that interactions increase and students learn from one another. There will be some talking to each other in this module, working in small groups with my help as and when required. And both you and I get more feedback. So for example, I've got the quiz every week. You'll know how well you've done in that quiz instantaneously. So every week you've kind of got a check in how you're doing. And for me, I can say, okay, they all did really well at those questions and this is a bit they're struggling in. And then I can make the course do more into that area. So that's why we're flipping the classroom. I hope this works for you. If you have any questions about this methodology at any point or anything's a bit unclear, then please just let me know. One thing that's quite interesting in this flipped classroom for me is that my role really changes. I mean, are you a lecturer if you don't give any lectures? I think the answer is probably no. I'm not a lecturer in the conventional sense. I think I'm more of a facilitator, someone who's helping you to learn, somebody who's already learned some of the lessons along the way and can help you understand these. But in some ways, I'm also a peer. I mean, there'll be things that you know about computer games that I don't know. And I'm willing to put my hand up and say that I don't know all there is to know about computer games because I don't think really anybody does. I know quite a lot, and I'm happy to teach you what I do know. And I also think I will learn a lot from you during this module. So I think this is really about us working together to help you create this game at the end. From week 2 onwards, in the labs, you'll have a 30-minute slot with me. I'm going to call myself a lecturer because that's what university annotation is, so I'll just call myself a lecturer even though we discussed maybe that's not quite right. You'll have 30 minutes with me in a small group. So this will give you a chance to talk through previous works resources and how they relate to your game. You're all going to be making a completely individual game, so I think it's really important you have time to think, okay, last week I learned A, and I now need to really apply that to my game and work out what this means for me. You can choose these groups. I want those to be groups that you're happy to discuss in, so you can definitely choose the groups. However, we are going to use these groups for all group purposes, mainly so that you can build some relationships and trusts within that group and build ways of working together. So as well as having it for the labs, you'll also use them for the debates. I haven't mentioned the debates yet. We will be having a debate on ethics. You can use them for the seminars, which are every Friday. And at the very end of the module, just before the final handover, we'll be doing some play testing. So I really hope that you'll use these groups to do some play testing within. I think that worked really well because actually over the 8 weeks you'll have met in a small group every week and talked about your game. So it's great to finally be able to play each other's and finally see the final product. In the actual lab, there will be lab exercises on my done day to work through most weeks, if not every week, probably every week. Those are under the week, so for example, week 1 lab is already there. When you finish this, you can work on the reading and the assignments. So if you don't need all 5 hours working on the lab exercises in a half-an-hour meeting, feel free to go on to reading and assignments. Seminars. I've said most weeks here because this week, week 1, slightly different because I'm introducing things in this one. And also week 4, when we have our ethics debate, will be a bit different as well. But every other week, 9 AM to 10 AM, we have our quiz, which, as I said, is made up by the questions you submit and some other questions from me to try and make a really rounded quiz. 10 AM to 11 AM, we'll have a seminar, and that's a way of having a small group discussion. We'll be using a bit of technology there called Padlet to allow us to actually build up a picture of your learning as a class. And then 11 AM to noon, we'll have a guest lecture from an expert in games. And they'll be from different aspects of games and the games industry. So course breakdown. Some of you will be glad to know, some of you will be disappointed. It's all split the room here. This module is 100% coursework. There are no exams. Okay. There are 3 sort of individual traditional assignments. There's the game overview video, which is due at the end of week 4, beginning of week 5. And that's really an overview of what game you're going to make, the design part of your game. Then at the end of week 8, there is a game code design element, which is really about designing your actual code and what the code's going to look like and making sure you actually know how you're going to achieve this. Things like class diagrams and a bit more in depth than that. The game itself, which is like the exam equivalent, is worth 60% of the module. That breaks down to 50% for the actual game. And I know some people have already asked for a marking scheme. There is one on my Dundee under assignments. And then 50% of the actual game, 10% for the reports that you'll write as well. The report just shows that you understand everything you've done. Professionalism is the remaining 20% of the module. So what do I mean by professionalism? Well, this module is all about really getting ready to launch your own game. And if you're going to do that, you're going to behave in a professional manner. So in this module, we have marks for professionalism. You've got 1% for each of the 6 questions that you create. We're creating a question each week, as I said. 1% for each of those, as long as they're good, rigorous questions. So questions that in some way make somebody think, oh, that's quite interesting. 1% for passing each of the 6 quizzes, and that's a pass at D3, so 40%. If you pass, you get 1%. 4% for taking part in our ethics debate. I hope you get excited about that. Now it's in week 4. 2% for play testing, so that's taking part in the group play testing at the end of the module. And 2% for what I've called loosely submitting professionally. So in particular, with the very last assessment when you're submitting the code, you'll have to really think about how you do that in such a way that it's accessible to me and that I can read it. So there's 2% of the module for submitting professionally. Timings, so the overview of game videos about weeks 1 to 4. In general, the module is split into 2 parts, the design parts first and the coding part second. So the design parts are the first 4 weeks, the coding parts the last 4 weeks. design your game and then learn how to code it. So the overview of game videos on the design part, and that's weeks 1 to 4. The full game code design, so that's how you're actually going to write the game, is during week 8, and the game itself you work on throughout the semester, but it's during the last week of the exam period. Professionalism, just gone through the breakdown for that, that will really be throughout the module. Deadlines, if you see the assignment area in My Dundee, you'll see that all the assignments are actually there in assignment specs, and you can see the full and actual deadlines there. So week 1, so we're currently in, is game design. It's thinking about the idea behind the game. What sort of game do you want to make, and why is that the game you want to make? Week 2, we're moving on to look at graphics and audio. And this is about what kind of graphics are you going to use and where you're going to get them from, what kind of audio you're going to use and where you're going to get them from. There actually are no marks at all for creating graphics and audios, so you can use other people's as long as you don't breach copyright. So I think that's really important. We will have a guest lecture from Phil Vaughan, who works for Duncan O'Jordanson College of Art and Design. He works in the animation team there, but in the past he has worked for the games industry, and he'll be talking about how you create art for computer games. So it's about art, not R. Week 3, it's talk about hardware and software, which system will you implement for and why, and which software will you use to implement and why we use that software. 2 questions are obviously quite linked. We'll have a guest lecture on that week from Dr. Rose Harris-Virtel from the St Andrews University School of English, who's an expert in narrative in games. So she'll be talking about how you get a narrative right through the games. Week 4 is our ethics and moral issues week. So we're thinking about what are they? What are the ethics and moral issues to do with gaming? And are there any that you should worry about for your game? That's not to say you can't do something that some people might think is controversial. It's just been making sure that you know what's controversial and you're aware of all the controversies. So this week will be quite a bit different to others, as we're actually going to have a debate. The reason behind that is that actually what's ethically right and wrong is really subjective. And so I think it's really important that you have a chance to think about where your lines are and to really push your lines and discuss your lines. So we'll be having that debate in week 4. Week 5 is event-driven programming. So event-driven programming is how games are mainly programmed. There's some exceptions, but event-driven programming is really the paradigm that's used for gaming. There will be a guest lecture that week. I've asked somebody from the local games industry to come in that week, but they haven't yet confirmed, so that's currently TBC, but there will be one, I promise. Week 6, we're looking at game-specific programming things, in particular physics engines, artificial intelligence, which I'm enthusiastic about, and security. And that week we've got a guest lecture from Dr. Christopher Jefferson from the University of St Andrews, who will be talking about security in computer games. Week 7 is design patterns. I know we've already touched on design patterns a bit in object-oriented analysis and design. We'll be doing a bit more of that. In particular, there are some patterns which are only used in games. So we're looking at the gaming patterns, and they can really help you when it comes to code. So it's a really important thing to be aware of. Also have a guest lecture that week from Brian McNichol. Brian currently runs the Centre for Enterprise in the University of Dundee, but he was the founder of Dynamo Games, which he ran for a large number of years. Dynamo Games was the first ever app-based game company to win a BAFTA, so it's a really quite an interesting story of how to start up and run your own games company. Week 8 is when the final code design is due in. We won't actually have a seminar that week, because every single one of you will have some one-to-one time on the Wednesday, Thursday or Friday, about 15 minutes with me in a one-to-one to talk through your code design and just to make sure that that will work and you've really thought through all the pitfalls and you know what you're doing. After the exams, the main game deadline is noon on Wednesday the 15th of May. What we're going to try and do is put all the other exams as early as we can, so that you've got at least one free week just to work on your game, because I think that time will be really important for you. We've also got the play testing in groups on Friday the 10th of May. So that is a date when you actually have to be in the university, so it's worth keeping that clear in your diaries now. Quite often a question I get from this module is, how do I break down my time? So this module is 20 credits. The way throughout the university you go from credits to hours. It's multiplied by 10, it's a simple calculation. So this entire module should be taking about 200 hours. The way I think about this is about 20 hours a week plus 40 hours in that last week for the final game. So each week we have we have 8 hours in class. We have 3 hours in the seminar and 5 hours in the lab, so it's 8 hours in class, and that counts towards your 200 hours. Approximately 6 hours of reading a week, so it's about 6 chapters every week, and I think each one takes about an hour, and that probably includes writing your question. And then about 6 hours of personal study a week. So that can be time to work on assignments, can be time to look into other things that interest you, time to actually work on the game code. So I think that's how you should think about breaking down your week. Reset, there is a reset. It's a coursework only reset, and it will be due in early summer. Plagiarism. So you've probably heard me as Associate Dean of Learning and Teaching talking about plagiarism before. Plagiarism is a copying of others' work and passing it off as your own. University views this as a very serious offence. Okay, the first offence is usually you get a 0 for the coursework and a warning. If you get a 0 for the coursework in this module, you have failed the module. So that's a really big penalty. So we want to make sure that we don't have any plagiarism issues at all. Repeat offences could result in failing the module or expulsion from the university. So if you've already had a plagiarism offence, it's even more important that you get it correct in this module. What is acceptable? So in the real world, programmers reuse code from books or from the web all the time. The only thing I would say is that I actually do use code from books and web all the time, as all programmers do. I always make sure I understand how that code works. And I think if you're reusing them, you should be aware of how it works and make sure it's completely functional and there's no backdoors in that you don't expect. So that's my basic rules. In general, there's very few large programs written entirely from scratch. Okay, so I'm saying real world programmers reuse code from books on the web, and I kind of want you to do a module. How does that measure up against the university's plagiarism policy? Well, for this module, I encourage you to find solutions to program problems on the web. If you find some code that's useful, feel free to use it in your project, but you must make sure you acknowledge that the code is not yours and say where you got it from. And you should do that in 2 places. So you should do that actually in the code, you put a comment in to say, not my code and here it's from, and you should also do that in the report as a reference. If you do that, then you won't fall foul of this plagiarism policy. In general, I suggest in terms of plagiarism that for computing modules, you make sure you know what's required and expected in each module. In some modules, in specific courseworks, they really do mean it to be done completely from scratch to emphasise a concept. Okay, so in those modules, you really can't use anything from books or from online. Usually, all report writing should be your own work. Sure, you can understand why that is. If you do quote another author, give the source. In general, if you're in doubt about plagiarism at all, feel free to ask me and I'm happy to help. I'd rather you asked me and said, this is plagiarism, than we had a problem 2 weeks down the line. So if you really don't know, just ask. So I always like to reflect on last year's Run Out Against Programme module and think, based on the students' feedback, what changes did I make? Well, the first thing is it's now an 8-week module. It was an 11-week module, but with the Agile changing to be 3 weeks, it's now an 8-week module. That was on students' feedback. They wanted to do Agile and nothing else for a while. It does mean that this module is more condensed. It's means you've got more hours per week on it. But I think that will actually work quite well. But I'm happy to monitor that, so let me know how that goes. I've added, based on feedback, a lot more discussion time. So students last year said, well, we've got half an hour with you in the seminar, and that's great, but we'd like even more discussion time, so I've got an extra hour of discussion time into the timetable. I've got rid of the group assignments. There was a group assignment on design patterns last year, which the students really both didn't enjoy, but more importantly, didn't find useful. I thought it was far more useful to think about how design patterns relate to their own game than to do it as a group who are all doing different games. So we've got rid of that this year and we're doing that a bit differently. Also, I have updated the reading and updated the books. It's new books for this year because the books were just looking a bit old and shabby. And some of the technology they were talking about was completely out of date. So this year we've got brand new books. If you have any questions, please do comment in the comments below and I'll try and keep an eye on this. I hope that's been really useful for you, and I really look forward to working with all of you. Take care.